It all started when I moved to a new city. I was 26, fresh out of college, and excited to meet new people. A few friends had suggested trying out a dating app, so I thought, why not? After a few days of swiping, I matched with someone who seemed absolutely perfect, Alex. His profile was everything I'd been looking for. He loved hiking, traveling, and volunteering at animal shelters. His bio read, adventure enthusiast, dog lover, and looking for something real. We started chatting, and honestly, it felt effortless. Alex was funny, thoughtful, and seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me. After a week of late-night texts and calls, he suggested meeting in person. "Let's grab dinner at that Italian place downtown," he said. It was a cozy spot I'd been meaning to try, so I said yes. The restaurant was just as charming as I'd imagined. Alex arrived on time, and to my relief, he looked exactly like his pictures. He even brought me flowers. How sweet was that? Dinner was filled with laughter and great conversation, but there was one thing that felt a little off. Alex didn't eat much. Instead, he spent most of the evening watching me. Not in a flattering way either. His gaze was intense, like he was studying me. At one point, I joked about how good the food was, and he said, "I'm more interested in watching you enjoy it." His tone was calm, but something about the way he said it made me uneasy. When the date ended, Alex insisted on walking me to my car. At first I hesitated, but then I thought, he's been so nice all evening. What's the harm? As we reached my car, he leaned in for a hug. It lasted a little too long, so long that I had to awkwardly pull back. That's when his grip tightened for a split second before he let go. He smiled and said, "Sorry, I just felt a connection." I laughed it off, but deep down, I felt uneasy. The next morning, I woke up to a text. "Good morning, beautiful. Did you sleep well? Sweet, right?" But then, throughout the day, the messages kept coming. "Why aren't you responding? Are you okay? I saw you were online. Who are you talking to?" I felt smothered. It was like he expected me to respond instantly, and when I didn't, his text became passive-aggressive. One message even said, "Don't ignore me. I don't like being ignored." That's when I decided to block him on the app. Problem solved, I thought. That night, around 11 p.m., there was a knock at my door. I wasn't expecting anyone, so I peeked through the peephole. My heart stopped. It was Alex. "Emily, I just wanted to check on you. I saw your lights were on." His voice was calm, almost too calm. My mind raced. How did he know where I live? I didn't answer. I stayed perfectly still, hoping he'd leave. After what felt like hours, I finally heard his footsteps retreat. When I checked the next morning, I found a note slipped under my door. It read, "I'm sorry if I scared you. I just can't stop thinking about you." I called the police, but they said there wasn't much they could do without evidence of a crime. Weeks went by without any more incidents, and I started to feel like I could breathe again. Then, one night, I received an email from an unfamiliar address. It was a picture, my picture, taken through my bedroom window. The caption read, "You should have swiped left." After that experience, I deleted the app for good, and later learned that my story is just one of many. It started innocently enough. I matched with Daniel on a Friday afternoon. His profile wasn't flashy, just a few pictures of him hiking and one with his dog. His bio simply said, "Looking for someone to share adventures with." Daniel wasn't my usual type, but there was something intriguing about him. His messages were polite, maybe even a little shy, which I found refreshing compared to the usual flirty one-liners. After a few days of chatting, he suggested meeting up for coffee. "There's this little cafe by the park," he said. "It's quiet and the coffee's great. I think you'll like it." When I arrived, Daniel was already there, sitting at an outdoor table with a cup of coffee in hand. He smiled as I approached, and for a moment, I felt my nerves settle. He seemed normal, kind even. The cafe was as quaint as he described. The air smelled of roasted beans, and a soft hum of conversation filled the space. We spent the next hour talking about books, travel, and our favorite places to hike. But then, things took a strange turn. Midway through our conversation, Daniel's expression changed. His eyes flicked over my shoulder, narrowing as if trying to make out a distant figure. "Did you see that?" he asked abruptly, his voice low. I turned around, but all I saw were families in the park and a few people walking their dogs. "See what?" I asked, glancing back at him. "Never mind," he said, forcing a smile. But his hand trembled as he lifted his coffee. A few minutes later, he did it again, this time looking past me toward the cafe's entrance. His face drained of color, and he sat frozen, gripping the edge of the table. "What's wrong?" I asked, my own nerves starting to fray. "I think I need to leave," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I blinked, caught off guard. "Is everything okay?" I just remembered something I need to do," he stammered, avoiding eye contact. He grabbed his phone and stood up so quickly that his chair scraped loudly against the pavement. Before I could say anything, he muttered, "I'll text you," and hurried away, leaving his half-full coffee cup on the table. I sat there for a moment, stunned and embarrassed, wondering if I'd somehow scared him off. But as I finished my coffee and prepared to leave, I noticed something strange. Across the street, a car idled with its engine on. A man sat in the driver's seat, staring in my direction. I couldn't make out his features, but his posture was rigid, almost unnaturally still. He wasn't looking at me directly, but I could feel his gaze like a weight pressing on my chest. Trying to brush it off, I walked quickly to my car. When I glanced back, the car was gone. By the time I got home, my unease had settled into something deeper, a gnawing sense that this wasn't just a case of a bad date. Later that night, I got a text from Daniel. "I'm sorry I had to leave so suddenly. It's complicated." I didn't reply. Something about the whole situation just felt off. A week passed, and I hadn't heard from him again. Then, late one night, my phone buzzed with a call from an unknown number. I ignored it, but a voicemail came through. When I played it, my blood turned to ice. It was Daniel's voice, shaking and barely audible. "They're watching us both," he whispered. "Don't go back to the cafe, please." The message cut off abruptly. The next morning, his profile had vanished from the app. When I returned to the cafe to ask about him, the barista gave me a puzzled look. "No one like that's ever been here," she said. Was Daniel running from something or someone, or was it all an elaborate setup? I may never know. Meeting someone online always comes with risks, but I never imagined that what started as a casual coffee date would turn into a fight for my life. A few months ago, I matched with someone named Grace on a dating app. Her profile was simple, just a couple of pictures and a bio that read, "Looking for someone to laugh with." She seemed sweet, and her messages were charming and funny. We clicked right away, talking about everything from favorite movies to childhood memories. After a few days, Grace suggested meeting up. "There's a cafe just outside the city," she said. "It's quiet and great for first dates." Something about the suggestion felt odd. Why not choose somewhere more central? But I didn't want to seem rude. She said she didn't like crowds, and her reasoning felt believable enough. When I arrived, the cafe was nearly deserted. It was tucked away at the end of a quiet street, the kind of place you'd never notice unless someone told you about it. I texted Grace to let her know I was there. A few minutes later, the door opened and a woman walked in. She didn't look much like her profile pictures. Her hair was shorter, her features slightly different, but I brushed it off. Filters and angles can change how anyone looks, right? She smiled warmly. "You must be Daniel. Sorry I'm late," she said. Her voice was pleasant, almost too pleasant, and for a while, the conversation was easy. We talked about movies, her love of books, and how she hated city life. But as time passed, I noticed her demeanor shift. She started glancing over her shoulder every few minutes, her phone lighting up with notifications she didn't check. Her laughter felt forced, and I couldn't shake the feeling that her smile wasn't reaching her eyes. About 20 minutes in, Grace excused herself to use the restroom. She left her phone on the table. Almost immediately, a message lit up the screen. I glanced at it instinctively, but what I saw made my stomach twist. The text read, "He's alone. Block the exits." I froze. My heart started pounding so loudly I was sure someone nearby could hear it. Was this some kind of sick joke? When Grace returned, I tried to act normal, but I must have failed. She sat down, tilted her head, and asked, "Is everything okay?" I forced a smile and nodded, mumbling something about needing to leave soon. Her expression changed, her smile hardened into something predatory. "You're not going anywhere," she said, her voice quiet but firm. The front door of the cafe opened and a man stepped inside. He was massive, easily over 6 feet tall, with a muscular build. He looked around briefly, then locked eyes with Grace. She stood up, smiled, and said, "He's ready." My instinct screamed at me to run, but I was frozen in place. The man started walking toward our table, his footsteps slow and deliberate. Desperation surged through me. "I need to use the restroom," I muttered, grabbing my phone. I stood up, trying to appear calm, but every muscle in my body was ready to bolt. The moment I turned the corner and was out of sight, I ran. My legs felt like lead, but adrenaline kept me moving. I pushed through the back door into an alley and sprinted to my car, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I didn't stop until I was miles away. When I finally pulled over to catch my breath, my phone buzzed with a call from an unknown number. I didn't answer, but a voicemail came through. The voice on the message was deep and threatening. "You got lucky this time, but you're already marked. We'll find you." Shaking, I checked the dating app. Grace's profile was gone, deleted. It was like she never existed. I still don't know what they wanted or how close I came to finding out, but one thing is clear: not everyone gets to escape. Some matches feel like destiny, until they spiral into a nightmare you can't escape. This is the story of how a perfect date turned into the most terrifying experience of my life. Her name was Megan. She was smart, funny, and beautiful. At least, that's what I thought at first. We met on a dating app and clicked almost instantly. Our conversations lasted for hours, and I couldn't believe how much we had in common. It felt like I had finally found someone who truly understood me. After about a week of chatting, we decided to meet in person. Megan suggested a popular diner near my place. "It's cozy and has the best milkshakes," she said. I agreed, excited but a little nervous. She seemed perfect, almost too perfect. When I arrived, Megan was already there, sitting in a booth by the window. She looked just like her pictures, bright smile, red hair, and a confident posture. At first, everything was great. We talked for hours, and I found myself drawn to her energy. She laughed at my jokes, her voice warm and melodic. But there was something about her eyes, an intensity that felt just a little off. As the night went on, the conversation turned personal. She told me how much she hated being alone and how she'd been searching for someone exactly like me for years. Her words felt flattering, but something about the way she said it made my stomach twist. When we were saying goodbye, she asked, "Can I see you again tomorrow?" I laughed, thinking she was joking, but her expression stayed serious. "I mean it," she said, her voice firm. "I feel like we were meant to meet." Over the next few days, Megan became intense. She would text me constantly, morning, noon, and night. If I didn't reply fast enough, she'd send more messages, asking if I was okay or why I was ignoring her. At first, I thought she was just excited, but it quickly became suffocating. One night, she called me at 2 a.m. "I couldn't sleep," she said. "I just needed to hear your voice." Her tone was calm, almost hypnotic. I told her it was late and that I needed rest, but she wouldn't hang up until I promised to see her again. Things escalated a few days later. I came home from work to find a note taped to my front door. It was from Megan. "I miss you. Don't make me come find you." My blood ran cold. I hadn't told her where I lived. When I confronted her, she laughed it off. "I just wanted to surprise you," she said. "Isn't that romantic?" Her tone was playful, but her eyes were sharp, unyielding. I told her it was too much and that we needed to slow things down. She didn't take it well. That night, I blocked her number and deleted her from the app. But it didn't stop her. Over the next week, she showed up at my workplace, sent flowers to my office, and even waited outside my gym. Each time she acted like nothing was wrong, her smile unnervingly cheerful. Then, one night, I woke up to a sound that made my heart stop. A slow, deliberate tapping on my bedroom window. I froze. I lived on the second floor. The tapping continued, steady and insistent. My breath caught in my throat as I slowly got out of bed and peeked through the blinds. There she was, standing on a ladder, staring right at me. Her expression was blank, her eyes wide and unblinking. I called the police, and by the time they arrived, Megan was gone. The ladder was still there, leaning against the side of my building, but there was no sign of her. I moved out the next month, hoping to leave her and the nightmare behind, but just when I thought I was safe, she found a way to remind me that she wasn't finished. A few weeks later, I received an email from an anonymous address. The subject line read, "You can't hide forever." Attached was a single photo. It was a blurry image of me, taken from outside my new apartment window. Even now, I can't look out of my window at night without imagining her there, watching, waiting. A few months ago, I matched with someone named Olivia on a dating app. Her profile was simple but intriguing. A few pictures of her smiling outdoors, a dog by her side, and a bio that read, "Nature lover seeking adventure partner." She seemed sweet, and our conversations flowed effortlessly. We talked about hiking trails, favorite movies, and dream vacations. After about a week of chatting, she invited me to a bonfire party at her family's cabin in the woods. "It's nothing big," she said. "Just a few friends, some drinks, and good vibes." The night of the party, I drove about an hour out of the city to the cabin. The road was narrow and surrounded by dense trees, and my GPS struggled to keep up. When I finally arrived, the cabin was dimly lit, with a single string of lights hanging over the porch. Olivia greeted me at the door, smiling warmly. "Come on in," she said. Inside, the air smelled like wood smoke, and soft music played in the background, but something felt off. The cabin was eerily quiet, and I didn't see anyone else. "Where is everyone?" I asked. She hesitated for a moment, then smiled. "They're on their way. Let's hang out until they get here." She handed me a drink, but I noticed she wasn't drinking anything herself. Instead, she just watched me with an unblinking intensity that made me uneasy. We talked for a while, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The cabin felt too quiet, almost unnaturally so. Every time I glanced out the window, I thought I saw movement in the trees, shadows darting between the trunks. When I mentioned it to Olivia, her expression barely changed. "You're imagining things," she said, her voice calm but firm. After an hour, I told Olivia I needed to leave. Her smile vanished. "You can't leave yet," she said, her voice sharp. Before I could respond, the front door creaked open and 3 men walked in. They didn't say a word. They just stood there, staring at me. My heart pounded as Olivia locked the door behind them. "What's going on?" I demanded, trying to stay calm. Her smile returned, but it was different this time, cold and calculating. "You shouldn't have come here," she said. The men started to close in, and I knew I had to act fast. I threw the drink in Olivia's face and bolted for the back door. I could hear them shouting behind me as I ran into the woods, the cold night air cutting through my lungs. The forest was pitch black, the trees looming like shadows, and every snapping twig made my heart leap. I stumbled over roots and branches, my legs burning, but I didn't stop. Their voices grew louder, closer. Then, in the distance, I saw headlights. Someone driving down the main road. I sprinted toward the light, waving my arms and screaming for help. The car stopped, and the driver, a middle-aged man, let me in. As we sped away, I looked back to see Olivia and the others standing at the edge of the woods, their silhouettes barely visible in the darkness. They didn't chase us. They didn't have to. Their smiles said everything. The next day, I went to the police. When I told them about the cabin, their faces grew serious. "That cabin's been abandoned for years," one of them said. "There's no one living out there anymore." I checked the app when I got home, but Olivia's profile was gone, like she never existed. All I had left was a voicemail she'd sent earlier that night. Her voice was soft, almost teasing. "Next time, we won't let you leave." Even now, I can't drive past a forest without imagining shadows moving between the trees, wondering if she's still out there, waiting.